Discover the miraculous story of Esther, God's divine plan revealed in 12 incredible days of faith. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, the sovereign reign of Ahasuerus overshadowed the land of Shushan, where the fragrant scent of royal myrrh mingled with the hopes and fears of its inhabitants. A young Jewish woman named Esther found herself caught in an astonishing current of events, her humble origin swept away in the waves of fate as she was crowned queen, an elevation not sought but perhaps divinely ordained. The palace, with its ivory pillars and tapestries of gold, was a world of opulence, yet under the gilded ceiling lurked shadows of ambition and malice. Haman, the king's advisors, spun webs of deceit with a heart burning with hatred towards the Jewish people. The decree he crafted carried the weight of annihilation, a chilling sentence unveiled before a king oblivious to the tempest brewing around him. Amidst this turmoil, Esther's cousin Mordecai, a wise man with a heart burdened by the plight of their people, sought her out. "Esther," he implored her solemnly, "who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" His words echoed in the chambers of her heart, heavy with the significance of her royal status as it coiled around the destiny of her people. The betrayal she sensed twisted within her. She had become what she had not wished to be, a queen among those who desired her people's demise. With the fate of her people teetering on a knife's edge, Esther resolved to embrace her calling. For 3 days and nights, she fasted and prayed, enveloping herself in the legacy of her ancestors, who had endured suffering with unwavering faith. In the depths of her spirit, she sought God's guidance, her heart heavy yet hopeful. On the 4th day, adorned in her royal garments shimmering like the sunset, Esther's steps echoed toward the king's inner court. Swallowed by the fragrant air of myrrh and spikenard, she steadied her breath. With each stride, she felt the weight of eternity pressing upon her shoulders, the eyes of the court silently pleading for the outcome of her audacious move. As she entered the king's presence unbidden, the hushed whispers of the assembly turned to anxious anticipation. Ahasuerus raised his gaze, and in that instant, he welcomed her approach with grace that hung like a lifeline in the air. In a moment of divine orchestration, Esther proposed a banquet, an invitation laden with promise and intrigue. The king, intrigued by her invitation, complied, unknowingly stepping into the tapestry Esther was weaving. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. Days flowed like river water, as Esther orchestrated both caution and intention through successive feasts. Each gathering dripped with suspense yet served as a conduit for God's providence. The hearts of those present shifted subtly as if beckoned by a divine whisper, while Esther's truth remained deftly cloaked in mystery. The weight of her upcoming revelation pressed upon her, the clock ticking toward a resolution both daring and divine. She, the queen, the voice of a nation, would soon reveal both her identity and the heinous plot against her people to King Ahasuerus. With the tension mounting, Esther stood on the threshold of her destiny, pondering the magnitude of her choice. Would her words shatter the darkness enveloping her people? The stage was set, and the divine drama awaited its climax, each heartbeat a call to courage in the face of impending peril. On the 3rd day, as the sun cast its golden hues across the land, the air thickened with expectancy. Esther could feel it, the weight of her revelation pressing down upon her heart. Prepared as she was, the thought of disclosing her true identity and the fate of her people sent ripples of anxiety through her spirit. She ascended to the royal banquet hall once more, her heart intertwined with purpose and dread, for she knew that this was the moment of unveiling. King Ahasuerus reclined at the head of the table, his gaze steady upon her beautiful countenance. The aroma of sumptuous foods wafted around the gathering, yet Esther felt a pang of hunger that was far deeper, one that craved for justice and mercy. With the court filled with nobles and officials, her voice was but a fragile thread in the tapestry of high and noble discussion. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice cautiously ethereal, capturing the attention of all present, "if I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted me, and my people be spared." Her words trembled in the rich air of the chamber, pregnant with the weight of her plea. Silence enveloped the hall, echoing her courageous declaration as she unveiled the hidden truth she had guarded so closely. "What is this?" The king responded, intrigue etched upon his brow. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" With a heart in sync with the divine purpose of her calling, Esther replied, "For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been merely sold as bondmen and bondwomen, I would have held my tongue, for the enemy has been dealt with the king's damage. Ahasuerus, his brow now furrowed with grave concern, inquired, "Who is this enemy? And where is he?" Esther, emboldened by the grace bestowed through her fervent prayers, pointed towards Haman, whose face flickered with shock and betrayal. "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman," she declared with resolute clarity, revealing the darkness that loomed over her people. Gasps filled the room as understanding washed over the gathering. The very men who had cloaked his hatred under the guise of loyalty now stood exposed, trembling under the weight of his own deeds. The malevolence that had brewed within Haman's heart now threatened his very existence. Ahasuerus seethed with righteous anger, rising from his throne. "What have you done?" he thundered. Haman fell at Esther's feet, pleading for mercy, his voice a desperate whisper, "Queen Esther, let not my sin be upon me. I acted unwisely." His pleas, however, resonated with the frailty of his character, a character that had sought the lines of power at the expense of innocent lives. But there was little time for Haman's pleas. The king's anger clashed with his conscience. "Remove this man," he commanded, his voice stern as he gestured to his guards, sealing Haman's fate. In that climactic moment, there arose a sense of divine justice orchestrated amid the turmoil. With the dawn of a new day, a divine promise rippled through the hearts of Mordecai and Esther, for the tide had turned, and God's plan was being meticulously unraveled. Yet, what lay ahead? Esther pondered in the silence following Haman's downfall. The salvation of her people had begun, but a deeper mystery still lingered, compelling them toward the brink of fulfillment in God's sovereign will. What must we now do? Thus, in that sacred space, a new chapter awaited, one that sought not only deliverance but also a renewed legacy. What, then, would become of God's people in this precarious moment? The narrative of Esther unfolds further still, revealing the blueprint of divine purpose to a heart entrusting itself to the will of God. The air within the banquet hall shimmered with palpable tension, thick as the very fabric of destiny. King Ahasuerus' heart broiled with fury, his judgment pronounced with the authority of one unswayed by malice or trickery. He turned his gaze upon Haman, whose stricken countenance betrayed the desperation of a man who had overstepped the bounds of power. "Bring me the records," the king commanded, his voice echoing against the stone walls like the clarion call of war. The scribes, knowing the gravity of such a task, hurriedly fetched the scrolls that outlined the edicts of the realm. In those records lay the decree that had doomed the Jews to destruction, a decree stamped with the king's own seal, which now felt as heavy as a millstone around the ruler's neck. As the scrolls were spread before him, Ahasuerus scanned the words, realizing the full extent of the deception that had unfolded in his court. "What has been written cannot be undone," he murmured, torment etched on his brow. Esther's heart raced, for she understood the burden both the king and her people bore. "Your Majesty," she interjected, her voice steady amidst the tempest, "may I yet plead for my people? Perhaps there lies a way permitted by your infinite wisdom, a reversal of this death decree." Ahasuerus turned to Esther, his expression softening as he perceived the sincerity etched upon her delicate face. "What then shall I do, my queen? How can I save those whom I have unwittingly condemned?" Encouraged by the fragile thread of hope, Esther raised her eyes to meet the king's. "If it pleases your heart, let letters be dispatched across the empire that allow our people to gather and defend themselves against those who wish to annihilate them. Grant this decree under your name, so that it may be fulfilled." The king nodded, his mind alight with renewed purpose. "Let it be written. And let my authority be their shield." Even as the ink flowed upon the parchment, Esther sought God in her heart, for she understood that the battle was no mere matter of flesh and blood. Haman, stripped of his power, was taken away by the guards, cast out from the royal presence like an unclean thing. His plots had been unraveled, yet she sensed a dark cloud still hung over her people, and she implored the heavens for further divine guidance. As the first rays of dawn broke like a new covenant upon the horizon, the letters beseeching deliverance coursed through the streets. The Jewish people, once submerged in sorrow, began to rise in hope. Mordecai sent word to them, proclaiming, "Do not lose heart, for the God of your forefathers is with us. Pray and fast, for our victory has been written in the annals of heaven." Esther, too, called for a day of fasting, gathering to herself her maidens, as well as Mordecai, that they might seek the favor of the Almighty. In the silent prayers of those who believed, a flame ignited, a spirit of courage kindling within their hearts. Yet other shadows whispered through the palace, for Haman's wife, Zeresh, learned of her husband's foiled schemes. "A disaster awaits," she proclaimed ominously, "for there is a power at work beyond our understanding." A spirit of foreboding loomed, promising calamity for the wicked and deliverance for the faithful. And thus the stage was set, the unfolding providence of God woven into the very fabric of time. But what further mysteries lay ahead for Esther and her people? As faith and fear clashed in the hearts of many, a divine strategy unfolded that would dismantle the darkness of Haman's treachery, setting forth a revelation of God's unfailing love and purpose. Little did they know, the culmination of their trials was merely the beginning of astonishing acts of the living God, who moves in ways unseen. As the sun ascended higher, drawing the shadows of night into retreat, Esther's heart remained heavy with the weight of her people's plight. The decree had gone forth, hope flickered in the hearts of the Jews, yet the specter of annihilation still loomed over them. Each hour burning in the light of day felt like an eternity as she gathered the faithful, her voice rising above the motley of whispered fears and fervent prayers. Esther, in the very heart of Shushan, entreated the Almighty with fervent supplication, her spirit intertwining with the destiny of her kin. "O Lord," she cried, "you who are faithful to your covenant, hear our plea. Let our foes be scattered, let their plans dissolve like mist in the morning sun." In the multitude outside the palace, families convened, mournful yet resolute. Their destiny no longer resting on the whims of a distant sovereign, they collectively lifted their hands, declaring with one voice the promises of God, not as a people without hope but as a congregation of faith in the eternal covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Meanwhile, within the palace walls, a baffled Haman sat in tumult, seething against the reversal of his fortunes. "Am I to be mocked in this royal court?" he seethed to his wife Zeresh. "Crafty schemes and silvered tongues have crafted my rise, yet here I sit, exiled from esteem. I shall not rest until the Jews are swept from existence, and their fate burns like the embers of a dying flame." Wife of a fool, Zeresh looked upon him, her heart troubled, and spoke wisely. "If Mordecai is indeed of the seed of the Jews, you shall not prevail. For there is more behind this struggle than what is seen, therein lies the power of the divine." As day melded into the soft hues of twilight, a messenger arrived, breathless and laden with tidings from the provinces. "All the Jews have received the decree of defense," he proclaimed, "and they gather as an army of the Almighty. Many are turning to prayer, and among them is Mordecai, rallying his men with zeal against the coming storm." A tremor ran through Haman's frame, for he perceived the hand of God moving, a force he could not comprehend, one greater than his ambition. "The heart of the king has shifted," he hissed. "I must act swiftly to extinguish this flame of hope." Meanwhile, Esther determined within herself that this moment called for more than passive waiting. "If I perish, she resolved, her heart steeled in divine appointment. She summoned her maidens again, saying, "Let us approach the king once more, for we have been chosen for such a time as this. Our people shall not fall under the sword of this villain." With prayer upon her lips, she adorned herself not in the royal garments alone but clothed herself in the courage of her convictions. She grasped the mantle of her identity, a Hebrew queen among a foreign throne, and stepped into the daunting hall of authority, her heart pounding in symphony with the will of God. As she entered, the golden scepter appeared extended toward her, a signal of favor from Ahasuerus. Time seemed suspended as she made her approach, the eye of the king upon her, and love emerged from the shadows of his earlier wrath. "Queen Esther," he said, voice softened, "what is your request?" "It shall be granted to you, even to half my kingdom." "Perhaps there is yet a grand design unfolding," she whispered to herself, "for God works in mysterious ways." And thus the convergence of Esther's plight and Haman's plot drew closer, coiling around the narrative of God's providence, where destinies intertwine and deliverance beckons forth. Yet what unfathomable turn of events awaited them? The path ahead lay shrouded in divine mystery, as a heavenly orchestration awaited its timely revelation. With every heartbeat, God's sovereign plan neared its grandeur, holding the world captive in eager expectation. As the eyes of Ahasuerus lingered upon Esther, she gathered her resolve, sensing the gravity of the moment. "If it pleases the king," she began, her voice steady as the tide, "let my life be granted to me and my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." A shiver coursed through the court, as whispers broke forth among the attendants. The king, his brow furrowing in disbelief, was taken aback. "Who is he, and where is he who would dare presume to do such a thing?" he thundered, his voice carrying the weight of his authority and the edge of a growing fury. "An adversary and enemy, this wicked Haman," she declared, pointing towards the men whose ambitions now flickered under the judgment of the king's gaze. Turning in fury, the king's eyes flared with righteous indignation as they found Haman, whose countenance fell under the heavy burden of guilt and dread. The realization struck him like a storm: the once untouchable was now exposed, and the very plots he had crafted against the Jews were now turning upon him. Haman, grasping for air, fell before the queen, imploring her, "O Esther, spare my life. I did not know the full truth, for I had sought only to avenge myself upon your uncle. Hear me, I beseech you." Yet the moment was not one of mercy, for the heart of the king burned with fury. What reward could be sufficient for one who would seek the blood of my beloved queen and her people? He spat, calling forth the guards. "Bind him hand and foot and lead him to his fate." Haman's mind raced as he attempted to grasp the unfolding chaos. Decrees made in the name of honor had now transformed into threads of desperation. Words echoed ominously in his mind: "He who plots evil for another will often find it turned back upon himself." In the ensuing silence, the weight of divine purpose loomed heavy. The lesson of pride met with swift consequence, and as the guards seized Haman, Esther's heart dared to hope for deliverance. "May all who plot against your people be brought low," she murmured, eyes rising to the heavens in gratitude. As the guards led Haman away, the king turned to Esther with a gentler demeanor. "What else shall be done for your people?" A newfound compassion softened his resolve, now aware of the innocent lives hanging in the balance of his decisions. "Let a decree be written," she replied, emboldened, "allowing the Jews to defend themselves against any who rise against them. For though we are threatened, we have the right to stand and protect our own. Write that all in the kingdom shall know our strength is under your banner." With urgency, the king summoned the scribes, and by the royal seal, the new decree was penned that would grant the Jews a day of armed resistance, and in the heart of Shushan, a wave of hope surged among the beleaguered people. Yet, as the ink dried and night descended over the land, shadows of uncertainty danced upon Esther's heart. For in a twist of fate, the king's favor toward her had brought forth a reversal not simply of their plight, but of all destinies intertwined. Just as the moon shone bright upon a grieving world, the darkness of Haman's countenance now lay in ruins, and the path of providence yet unfurled further than any heart could know. A divine tapestry was being woven, one which hinted at a coming revelation of God's hand where the salvation of many would rest on the shoulders of one. And so, the stage was set, and heaven watched intently. What further miracles lay hidden beneath the surface of this unfolding story? What shadowy figures would soon be unmasked, revealing the profound depths of God's sovereign plan? Time would tell, for the ultimate confrontation of good and evil was yet to unfold, an enthralling climax still held within the hands of the Almighty. As dawn broke over Shushan, the whispers of the night still hung in the air, carrying with them a mixture of dread and hope. Esther, filled with a divine conviction, stepped into her purpose with a heart emboldened by her recent deliverance. She sought to rally her people, knowing the weight of her words could usher in a great turning point. Thus she gathered the elders of the Jews, and as they entered the space of her presence, the air thickened with an expectation of change. "Brothers and sisters," she spoke, her voice unwavering, "the king has granted us a day to defend our lives against those who seek to destroy us. We stand not merely for our survival, but for the glory of God and his everlasting covenant with our ancestors." There was a hush, and silence reigned as the gravity of Esther's words settled in their hearts. They remembered the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how God, the Most High, would protect and preserve his people. And it was here, before them, that a flicker of resolve ignited. "We will arm ourselves," came the voice of Mordecai, her uncle, whose loyal spirit had always been a beacon of faith. "We must be united. We shall rise against our oppressors with the strength that comes from the Lord himself." Encouraged by his words, the people began to prepare. They gathered weapons, rallied their families, and strengthened themselves by prayer and fasting, seeking God for wisdom and strength, echoing the words of Isaiah, "No weapon that is formed against you shall prosper," Isaiah 54 verse 17. But unbeknownst to them, the heart of Haman, once full of malice, was now simmering in the pit of despair and vengeance. He sat, bound and isolated, stewing in regret, but also plotting his revenge. "Though I have fallen, I shall bring chaos upon them before their appointed day of fighting," he vowed to himself, his mind twisting in the shadows of his own making. Meanwhile, Esther, seeking guidance, summoned the courage to approach the king once more. As she entered the royal chamber, Ahasuerus looked up, his expression softening. "What is your wish, Queen Esther?" "It shall be given to you, up to half my kingdom." "With your permission, my king, I wish to invite you to a banquet. A feast where matters of great importance shall be revealed," she replied, knowing this would be her moment to further expose the evil lurking in the shadows. Thus a banquet was prepared, and the king, intrigued, summoned Haman to join them, unaware of the plotted demise that loomed beneath the surface. As they feasted, Esther's heart raced, sensing the impending clash between light and darkness. Turning to the king, she began to recount the plight of her people, her words unfurling like a banner of truth amidst the decadent spread. "O king, grant me this favor," she appealed earnestly, "for the wicked Haman has plotted against us." The king's brow furrowed, questioning the loyalty of his trusted adviser as his betrayal laid bare, chaos unfolding before him. The tension in the air thickened, intertwining destiny with divine timing, as Haman's desperate scheming began to unravel. Yet, there remained layers to God's sovereign plan. For Esther's bold acts were not merely for her people's rescue, but a deeper purpose was set to emerge, revealing the chain of events orchestrated by the Almighty. Esther had become an instrument of salvation, yet the path ahead was fraught with peril. In the depths of darkness, light was poised to shine forth in ways yet unseen. Little did they know the final revealing of God's masterful design was soon to come, entwining their fates, promising that the faithful in distress are never forsaken, but rather shaped for His glory. What yet remained in the unfolding tapestry of divine purpose, where faith meets fury and God's might prevails? The throne of heaven would soon reveal its revelation, as one woman's courage prepared the ground for the salvation of many. As Esther's words hung in the air, the king's fury ignited a fire within him, a blaze of righteous indignation. "Who is he, and where is he, that dared presume to act against my queen?" Ahasuerus demanded, his fists clenched in wrath. Esther felt the weight of the moment engulf her. With a steady breath, she pointed to Haman, sitting at the banquet table, his countenance paling as realization dawned upon him like a heavy storm cloud. "It is this wicked Haman, the adversary of my people," she declared, her voice filled with divine authority. "He sought to destroy us, O king, to extinguish the light that God has set among us." The room fell into silence, the only sound echoing was the swift interwing of breath from those gathered. Haman's heart raced, the sound like thunder in his ears, for he understood that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. In desperation, he leapt from his seat and approached the queen, pleading, "Queen Esther, I the king's adviser, I have acted foolishly. Spare me, I beg of you. Show mercy." Ahasuerus, rising from his throne in fury, turned his gaze upon his adviser, unable to reconcile how a man he esteemed could harbor such malice. "Will you also assault the queen in my presence?" he thundered, his voice echoing through the chamber. At that moment, the king's eunuchs entered, drawn by the sound of commotion, summoned by the spirit of justice that filled the hall. They found Haman in an undignified position, begging for mercy at the feet of Esther. And in his folly was his ruin, for they took him swiftly, binding him for his treachery. Esther's heart swelled with a mixture of righteous relief and solemnity. "Let it be known," she proclaimed to the gathered assembly, "that God has delivered us from the hand of our oppressor. For in the darkest hours, His light shines forth to redeem." Amidst the chaos, the king commanded the very gallows Haman had built for Mordecai be used to expiate his sins, a turn of justice that highlighted the sovereignty of God even in the planning of human schemes. "Hang him upon it," Ahasuerus decreed, as the realization of divine justice settled like a holy shroud over the assembly. That same day, news swept through Shushan, echoing across the city, a testament to God's deliverance and the redemption of His people. Esther's courage had not only saved her own life but the lives of countless others. They rejoiced, lifting prayers of gratitude to God, for they understood, as it was written in Proverbs, "The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord," Proverbs 21 verse 1. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Esther and Mordecai sat together, contemplating all that had transpired. Mordecai then wrote letters to the Jews throughout the kingdom, proclaiming that the day set for their destruction would now be a day of feasting and joy, a day for celebrating God's unfailing goodness. But in the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled with divine promise, Esther sensed a stirring in her spirit, a whisper of something greater still to unfold. She recalled the words of the prophet Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future," Jeremiah 29 verse 11. Though the battle seemed won, in her heart, she understood this was but a chapter in the grand narrative of God's design. For with the rise of one, there often stirs conflict against another, and the promise remained a movement of deliverance yet awaited. What other shadows hang in the balance of this unfolding story? What divine resolutions lie beyond the veil of present treachery, and how will God's sovereign purpose weave through the lives of his faithful even further still? The tapestry of Esther's story was far from complete, as the quill of heaven prepared to write yet more of his grand design. And so it was, in the aftermath of Haman's downfall, that a wave of rejoicing swept through the streets of Shushan. The Jews gathered, united in prayer and thanksgiving, their voices rising like the fragrance of incense before the Lord. Esther and Mordecai stood before them, their hearts ablaze with the fire of divine deliverance. Mordecai, filled with the Spirit, called out, "Let it be known throughout the land that the God of our fathers has acted on behalf of his people. He has turned our mourning into joy, and our despair into hope. We shall not forget the wickedness devised against us, for the Lord has thwarted the plans of the adversary." The people responded with fervor, "Amen. Let his name be praised forever. For his mercy endures, and his promises are true." Esther, her heart tethered to the Almighty, could sense the weight of the future pressing upon her. She summoned courage anew, for she knew the heart of God was still drawing the faithful into a deeper understanding of his ways. "Brothers and sisters, let us also remember," she began, her voice steady amidst the tumult, "that our deliverance is not merely for our own sakes but for the purpose of glorifying God among the nations." While gratitude warmed their spirits, a tension filled the air, for the decree of destruction still loomed over their heads, penned with the king's seal and binding as the law of the Medes and Persians. Mordecai turned to Esther, sensing her silent battle. "Dear Queen," he implored, "more must be done. We cannot rest until the threat against our people is fully lifted. The king's heart must be moved once more." With wisdom beyond her years, Esther replied, "I shall go before him again. I fear for my life, yet I must act boldly, for I was called for such a time as this. The Lord's hand is in this matter, for I trust that he will grant favor once more." She took a moment, eyes lifted to the heavens, emboldened by divine purpose. As dawn broke over Shushan, Esther adorned herself in royal garments, each thread woven with prayer and resolve. Approaching the king's throne room, her heart quickened, for she knew this path held great peril. Yet she understood that the Spirit of God was with her, turning her dread into daring faith. The chamber was hushed as she entered. Ahasuerus looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "Even to half of my kingdom, it shall be granted to you." Esther, with a grace bestowed from above, replied, "If it pleases the king, I ask for a banquet. Let us celebrate together, for I long to share a matter of great concern concerning my people." The king's interest was piqued, for he sensed depth in her invitation. He commanded that the banquet be prepared at once, and all preparations were made with great haste. As she waited, Esther felt the weight of Israel's legacy pressing down richly upon her. The deliverance of her people was knitted into the fabric of God's eternal promise. In her humble heart, the stakes felt unabashedly high. When the time came, as they feasted, Ahasuerus inquired again, "What is your desire, Queen Esther?" With courage summoned from the depths of her spirit, she lifted her eyes and spoke, "If I have found favor in your sight, my king, spare my people, whom Haman sought to destroy. For we are bound to you as subjects, yet my heart grieves for our lives, which are at stake." And in that moment, an unseen force was at work in the heavens, and God's tapestry of redemption began to unravel further still. For amidst the clinking of silverware and the murmurs of guests, the fate of a people hung delicately in the balance, as the next move of God's eternal plan was poised to unfold. What would the king decree? Would salvation come, or would darkness threaten once more? The stage was set, and all of heaven watched with bated breath, for a divine confrontation loomed near. Thus, the question lingered, what revelations awaited in the corridors of Shushan, and what extraordinary twist would God's providence unveil next? As Esther's words hung in the air, a profound silence enveloped the hall, heavy with anticipation. The king's brow furrowed, and his eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Who has dared to plot against my queen?" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Esther, sensing the gravity of the moment, felt the movement of the Lord's purpose within her. "It is Haman, the adversary of my people, O king. He has cast lots to destroy us, to annihilate a people beloved by the Lord." Her voice trembled yet remained steady, empowered by divine strength. Ahasuerus turned pale with fury. "Bring forth Haman," he commanded, and his servants rushed out to the palace. As the king's heart swelled with righteous indignation, the thoughts of his benevolence towards Haman, a man he had honored, now turned to dread. When Haman arrived, the atmosphere shifted. He sensed the danger that hovered like a shadow over him. Upon entering the chamber, he saw the king's face ablaze with rage and Esther's eyes laced with compassion for her people. Almost instinctively, he recognized that his fate was sealed. "Is it true, Haman?" Ahasuerus demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Have you laid wicked plans against the queen and her people?" Haman, his voice catching in his throat, stammered, I am but your faithful servant, my lord. I wished merely to. Merely to what?" The king interrupted, advancing toward him. "To destroy what is innocent. To spill blood without cause." The very air vibrated with divine judgment as the king's anger grew. "Hear me, for you will pay dearly for your treachery." Astounded and terrified, Haman fell before Esther, begging for her mercy. "Let not my life be taken for a deed I have committed in folly. Surely, you have the favor of the king and may sway his heart." Esther, resilient in her compassion, raised her hand. "If I am to perish in speaking the truth, let it be. For the safety of my people, I shall not be silent." At that moment, the king, his heart torn, turned away from Haman. What shall be done to the man who has devised such evil? He asked the chamber filled with officials, their eyes darting between the king and the guilty man. Haman's heart sank, for he feared that the judgment he had so eagerly sought for the Jews would now befall him. He should be clothed in royal robes and paraded through the city, so all may know the honor bestowed upon him. He exclaimed, desperate to shift blame. "You speak wisely," Ahasuerus replied, his voice steady as stone. "Let it be so. Haman, you shall lead the procession for Mordecai the Jew." "Me?" Haman spat in disbelief, knowing well what this meant for him. As the laughter of the crowd and the music of the rejoicing began to fill the air, a deeper truth unveiled itself: the plot of evil aimed against God's chosen would serve as the very means of their exaltation. Mordecai's honor was lifted up upon Haman's shoulders, and the truth of God's providence thundered through the hearts of those present. Thus, the king's decree echoed forth, sealing Haman's fate and ensuring the safety of Esther's people. As darkness was cast upon the adversary, light illuminated the path for God's chosen. And somewhere beyond the gates of Shushan, a whisper began to stir among the people, whose hand guided the king's heart in this turmoil. What beacon of hope was rising even now, and how would the climax of God's promise reveal salvation for his people? The day was not yet over, rather, it was the beginning of a divine crescendo. Would there be a greater plan unfolding upon the horizon? For the Lord's hand was still at work, weaving history into the fabric of his glory, a tapestry threaded with stories of faith and divine interventions yet to be revealed. And it came to pass, after the days of feasting and rejoicing, that Esther stood before the king once more, her heart poised in the balance of hope and trepidation. Ahasuerus, still softened by the revelations of past days, turned to her and asked, "What further wish do you have, my queen?" "Even up to half my kingdom, it shall be granted." His words hung in the air like a gentle promise. With courage drawn from the depths of her soul, Esther responded, "If it pleases the king, let us remember the decree that sought our destruction. It must be undone." For although Haman has met his end, the words penned in the king's name still linger like a storm cloud over our heads. Her voice steadied as she spoke the truth, each syllable weighted with the urgency of her people's future. Ahasuerus, his brow furrowed, contemplated her words. What can be done to counter such a decree? Asked the king, his heart now fully aware of the precarious balance of power. In that moment, both king and queen felt the gravity of their decisions in alignment with divine purpose. Rising to her feet, Esther proclaimed, "Let letters be sent throughout the lands, granting our people the right to gather, to rise against any who would harm us. Let it be written that we are to defend our lives and our families." The king nodded gravely, understanding that Esther's plea was not born merely from a desire for reprisal but rather a call for justice, a justice intended to preserve the very lives of those whom the Almighty had chosen. Thus, scribes prepared new letters, the clatter of quills against parchment resounding like the drumbeat of approaching victory. The seal of Ahasuerus was affixed to these new commands, and they spread throughout the provinces. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the letters declared, "The Jews shall assemble and defend themselves, and it shall be a day of triumph and remembrance across the kingdom." With each inked line, Esther lifted her eyes to the heavens, her faith intertwined with the unfolding of God's purpose. The day of deliverance had been set, a day that would cut through the shadows of despair, ushering in a dawn of hope for the beleaguered Jewish nation. As the sun began to dip low over Shushan, whispers of the decree filled the streets, hearts quickened with anticipation. Families gathered to prepare, not merely to defend their lives but also to celebrate the living God who had orchestrated their salvation from the clutches of evil. In their unrest, there remained a spirit of faith, a belief kindled by the bravery of Esther and Mordecai. It echoed with the wisdom uttered by their forefathers, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord," Exodus 14 verse 13. The courage resonated in every household, igniting the resolve to unite and fight against their oppressors. The fateful day dawned, sunshine breaking over the land like divine favor. As the appointed time approached, the Jews stood ready, bold, armed, and emboldened by the presence of the Almighty. But in the shadows lurked remnants of darkness, for Haman's malice had not extinguished with his demise. His sons, whom he had taught twisted virtues, sought to reclaim their family's power. Unbeknownst to the Jews, they plotted a final defiance, a desperate attempt to retaliate against the decree of God's people. But the providential hand of God was still guiding the course of events. As the sun ascended higher, the time of judgment unfolded swiftly. Those who had sought to destroy the Jews could not withstand the fury of the righteous. When the battle ensued, the heavens bore witness to a divine clash that favored Esther's people. Creatures unknown, yet filled with hidden valor, surged forth alongside the Jews, empowered as they fought against oppression. Each prayer whispered in faith echoed through the battlefield as lives were saved, God's hand upon each and every defender. At the turning of the day, as night began to cloak the earth, Esther gathered her people to give thanks for a victory that had been won not just by their strength but by the faithfulness of their God. "Look at what the Lord has done," she proclaimed with exuberance, her voice rising above the throng. "He has turned our mourning into dancing, our fear into faith." The people rejoiced, for indeed the enemy was scattered, the plots of the wicked undone. They gathered together not only to celebrate but to affirm their identity as a people chosen by God, a people who trusted in His sovereign plan. As the seasons turned, their victory became a lasting legacy, a time of remembrance marked with joy and gratitude. Mordecai, now revered among the ranks of influential leaders, instituted a festival that would echo through generations, the Festival of Purim. A celebration not merely of survival, but of divine intervention, of faith, and the wonderful works of God. Years passed, yet the memory of that glorious deliverance lived on in the hearts of the Jewish people, reminders of God's unfailing love ringing loud in their midst. Esther, once an orphan in a foreign palace, had stepped boldly into her destiny, a queen who changed the course of history through her faith and courage. And the story of Esther became woven into the fabric of God's mighty acts, a testament that echoed through the ages, that even in the face of despair, faith, divine justice, and the unwavering love of God triumph in ways no human eye could see, no heart could fully fathom. Thus, let it be said, for all who read this story, that our God is faithful, His promises never fail, and the legacy of His people lives on, a declaration that reverberates across time. As you reflect on Esther's miraculous journey, know this: no matter the trials you face, there is a divine purpose at work in your life as well. Therefore, take heart to act boldly in faith, for you too have been placed where you are for such a time as this. If these sacred truths have stirred your soul, and if God's unyielding faithfulness has spoken to your heart through this account, subscribe immediately to our channel to stay connected to God's Word, for the next powerful biblical stories await you. Leave a like now to help spread God's Word through the algorithm, so that others may hear of His mighty works. Comment with your spiritual reflections and let us know how this biblical story has impacted your faith. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth and the gospel message. Don't wait even one more second, for the lives you touch through sharing could lead to transformative encounters with the living God.